Good afternoon and welcome back to the Johnson Space Center for our pre-flight briefings today. It's my pleasure to introduce the STS-117 Space Shuttle crew. I'll be introducing the commander and he will in turn introduce the rest of the crew members. So I give you Commander Rick Sturko.
Thank you, Kylie. Good afternoon. Our crew is very pleased to be here today. First of all, because it's a sign that we're getting close to launch. And more importantly, because it's always great to get here and meet with the members of the media and share the preparations that we've made for the STS-117 13A assembly mission. I'm going to make a few introductory comments, and then I'll introduce the members of the crew. So everybody here knows the training flow for a shuttle assembly mission is very intensive. We've been really focused on it for about 9 months now. Pretty much every day, long hours, and but we still do read the papers, and we've followed what's been going on. First thing I'd like to comment is the tremendous success of the mission STS-116 12A.1 and the difficulties that were encountered with the 4B solar array retract. Of course, we were watching that very closely because we knew we were going to be retracting 2B on this mission. And we followed the tremendous success with their 4 EVAs and all the great work that was done by the mission control team to get that solar array retracted. As you know, there's only 3 spacewalks scheduled for our mission. However, if the management requests us and if the cryo margins permit, we will be ready to do the 4th spacewalk if required. The second item you may have questions about is it's known that we've changed out a Capcom on this mission, and we are have had training with the replacement Capcom. This is not an unheard of circumstances that for medical reasons or personal circumstances we need to change out a Capcom or a crew member. And we have had good training with the new Capcom. His name is Lieutenant Colonel Terry Virts, United States Air Force. And we just had simulation with him this week, and we've trained with him in the past on generic simulations, and I'm quite confident there will be no impact to our mission. Terry also worked with Flight Director Kathy Kerner, who you talked with earlier today, on the STS-115 12A mission, a very similar profile, so he's intimately familiar with the details of what we'll be doing. I'd like to now introduce the crew and provide a few highlights of what they'll be doing on the mission. I know all this information is in your packets, but sometimes you don't have time to read everything. We can tell by your questions. So this will help you direct your questions at the appropriate crew member. I'm also going to mention how we address each other because when you hear these call signs or nicknames on the loops, you'll know who it is we're talking to. And so that'll hopefully be useful information for you. Our pilot is Colonel Lee Archambault, United States Air Force. His call sign is Brew. He flew the F-111 and F-117 aircraft operationally. Brew flew what professional aviators and military aviators probably consider to be some of the most difficult and challenging missions of the Operation Desert Storm air campaign in the F-117 aircraft. He then was an F-16 test pilot at Eglin Air Force Base. Brew's primary duty on this mission is to back me up on all the tasks we'll be doing during the ascent, the rendezvous, and the entry. During the rendezvous profile, he'll be performing 4 of the what we call MC burns, so he'll be doing that activity. And then once we are docked, Brew will be our prime SS RMS operator, the big arm on the station side, and he'll be performing the S3, S4 truss install along with FE2 Sunita Williams. We have if the opportunity presents itself, we also have a DoD payload on this mission called the Maui payload, and Brew will be performing all the THC and RHC, that's the translational and rotational hand controller inputs to capture that data for the Department of Defense, United States Air Force. On Brew's right is Colonel Pat Forrester, United States Army, retired. Pat's a Master Army aviator. He attended the Naval Test Pilot School, and he's flown just about everything that the Army flies. He did 2 spacewalks on STS-105, and Pat is our prime shuttle arm operator. He'll be pulling the truss out of the payload bay and flying it to the handoff position. Pat will also be doing spacewalks on our EVA number 2. He'll be leading that team, and if a 4th EVA is required, he'll also be doing EVA then. On his right is Dr. Steve Swanson, call sign Swanee. Swanee has a PhD in computers. I've known him for 12 years. He used to fly on the shuttle training aircraft, the STA, as a flight simulation engineer. He's the flight engineer on our crew, or the MS-2, and he will also be doing a spacewalks on the same team with Pat and helping us out with a little arm flying on both the shuttle and station arms. Next, we have our MS-3, Dr. Danny Olivas. We just call him Danny. Danny has a PhD in engineering. He did some great work out at JPL before he came here to the Johnson Space Center for NASA. And Danny will be doing spacewalks on EVAs 1 and 3. He's our lead on the photo TV, and he'll be able to answer any questions about that. Just I missed something on Swanee as our lead on the PGSC's, the shuttle computer. So if you've got any question about that, he'd be the one to ask, being a PhD in computers. Our last MS4, is Dr. Jim Reilly. We call him JR. He's not the youngest member of this crew. But he has great experience flying on STS-89 and then on STS-104, where he did 3 spacewalks. JR, before coming to NASA, had I said he's a geologist, PhD in geology, and he actually had a distinguished career in the oil exploration field. He's also a lieutenant in the Navy Reserves. JR is our lead EVA crew member. We call our EV1. And he'll be going out on the 1st and 3rd spacewalks. He's also our mid-deck captain and load master, which involves all the work that's done during the post-insertion time frame to get our mid-deck set up for on-orbit operations, and then the transfers, which there are very few up-mass transfers, but we hope to have quite a few down-mass bringing things back from the station. He'll be organizing all of that. And then, of course, getting the mid-deck organized for the deorbit preparations when we get ready for landing. Additionally, JR is our lead on the solar array deployments and retracts, and that ties in well with any contingency EVAs that may need to be done on the solar arrays. So that completes my introduction of the crew. We're honored to be here today, and we're ready to take your questions.
Okay, we'll start here over on this side in the room, please. Go ahead. Do you have a question, Tracy?
Yes, thank you. Tracy Watson, USA Today. I guess for the commander, you said that you don't expect an impact from the loss of the Capcom you've been training with for a while, and I'm wondering, are you sorry that you won't be working with the person that you started out with at all?
I think that we're in good shape with the current Capcom we've got, and we're just looking forward to the doing the mission right now.
Gina, in front.
Gina Sinceri for Jim Reilly or Danny Olivas. What did Beamer and Krister tell you about the solar array, the stuck solar array? It came back and gave you what kind of tips for retracting that if you have to go out there and work on it?
Well, for both of us, the best thing they gave us was the gauge on how they, or the information, if you will, for how they best were able to accomplish the task. So what took them an entire EVA, we're hoping to get done in significantly less time. So what they presented to us was a number of different ways to manipulate the solar array panels, which, as you know, some of them were folding backwards across the hinge, which was causing issues. And then we had the guide wires that were hanging up so that they weren't retracting fully. And so they gave us some tips on how to get at those, what kinds of techniques to use, what tools, where to push. And so they talked to all of us. We're actually going to have both teams involved in solar array retraction. Pat's going to be the first guy up with Swanee on the mass canister, the central portion of the solar array assembly. And then Danny and I are going to be the second team up to do our individual tasks. And the way we're doing it was a part of the information that they gave us as well, in that there are certain things that will happen, and the backwards array folding will happen probably early. And that's what Pat and Swanee will be looking at. And then Danny and I will be looking more at the guide wire hang-ups where the grommets are actually hanging up. So they gave us a lot of really good information, so we feel pretty well prepared for this.
Okay, and over here.
Hi, I'm Nancy Holland from KHOU, and again for the spacewalkers, as you deal with those tools, they were holding them up for us earlier. Did you have any input on any adaptations to those tools, or was there anything in particular that you found challenging with trying to work with the scraper, separator, whatever different kind of priors, wedgers that you're going to be using up there?
I don't know, Pat, you want to?
Well, fortunately, those are all tools that we use, not necessarily for this application, but they are tools that we've trained with in the water. And so it was really no problem to end up using them for this new task. So it's working out very well for us.
Bill Harwood with CBS maybe for Jim, I guess. Not that anybody's got a pool going on P62B, but I mean, based on what everybody's told you guys, what do you expect is going to happen up there in terms of what you may or may not have to do?
We're hoping that it's nothing different than what the guys on 12A1 saw, and that we're pretty well prepared for. So if it's the things like the guide wire hang-ups and the grommets and the backwards folding, we feel we got a pretty good task list set up so that we can accomplish that task. But there could easily be other things that pop up, and that's one of the things that we spend a lot of time. We have spent a lot of time, and we'll continue to spend some additional time before flight over in Building 9, where we've got an engineering model of the wing, and we can actually look at all these components. And so we're going to spend some more time with it. So to answer it, I'd say we got an even shot at getting it in without too much trouble, as long as it's nothing new that we've seen out there.
And when they were briefing us this morning, it sounds like really the only thing different from what your approach would be versus the 116 was you're stretching this out a little bit longer, and none of this action. I mean, got the point of it, I guess?
Right. In fact, when talking with Beamer, one of the things we captured out of that was there were certain things that didn't work as well. Then we pretty much dropped those out of our task list, and so we're going with the things that did work really well for them. For example, getting past the grommet sticking, most of it is just manipulating the grommets themselves along the guide wires with the scraper, or with the other tool that we have attached to our cheater bars, we call it. Those two things are pretty easy for us to do, and they seem to work really well for Beamer when he was out there doing it, to smooth out the array so that when it retracts, it comes in with minimal hang-ups. And they were getting more than one bay when they were doing that, which was something that we're going to spend a lot of time trying to accomplish on our EVAs.
Hi, John Schwartz in the New York Times. I guess it's for Dr. Reilly, but anybody can answer. It sounds like you feel that you really do have the array under control, or at least you've got a toolkit to work with everything. So what's got you nervous still? What are the things that you do go in with a little more concern about, if you don't mind my asking? Thanks.
Danny, you want to take that?
Well, one of the great parts about working here at NASA is that you have a number of highly qualified, highly capable, skilled people here on the ground to support our activities on orbit. And one of the things that I have noticed in the years that I've been here is that virtually any challenge that comes to these engineers and scientists, they're able to come up with suitable workarounds. And so while we will be on orbit on our own, we'll also have the support of hundreds, thousands of people here on the ground helping us out, so that if we do encounter things that we didn't intend on encountering, we should be able to hopefully very quickly come up with a remedy and implement it on orbit.
Mark Carreau from the Houston Chronicle, and mine's for Rick Sturkow. I realize NASA went through a bad time last week following an astronaut's arrest, and I wonder if you felt the need to pull your crew together for a little talk of some kind, or just to discuss it amongst yourself, and what you might have told them if you did, and if you have some thoughts on what you would like people to think of NASA. I think I'd be interested in that too. Thank you.
We, of course, it came up, like everybody else. We learned most of what we know through the media, and we discussed it amongst ourselves. We didn't have a meeting about it or anything. We've just been focused on our training, which is pretty intensive at this point in the mission preparations. Our management has been very supportive, and we just, they've done what they can to make sure we don't have any distractions beyond what you've already described, Mark.
Do we have any more questions here at the Johnson Space Center? Okay.
Yeah, Jim Oberg with NBC. It's for Colonel Archambault. I understand you'll be flying the post-separation fly-around. The post-separation, are you traditionally doing the piloting of the shuttle during separation? And what will you be doing during the separation? Will be how much photo documentation that we'll be doing?
Well, I will be flying the post-separation, the undocking, if you will, and then the fly-around if the propellant permits. And what I'll be doing is I'll actually be flying mostly with the translational hand controller. And as you've mentioned, one of the big reasons we do this is so that we can good documentation, photo imagery of the space station as we leave it. So at a minimum, we'll be backing out to approximately 400 feet. And if the propellant does not permit, then we separate at that point. Propellant permitting, we'll do a 360 around the space station to get good photo imagery of the space station from all angles.
In the back there.
Hi, I'm Marianne Dyson from National Space Society, and I want to know what influenced you to choose your career in science and engineering when you were a young person, specifically if there were any books or authors that influenced you?
An answer on that, Brew?
For myself, when I was young, I was attracted to the aviation field. I grew up in a small town, which is about 4 or 5 miles outside the city of Chicago, and we had another actually, we have a very famous person from that town, a fellow named Eugene Cernan. So he was the first person of notoriety to appear from our town, and also distinguished by being the last man to walk on the moon. So when I was growing up, he was the local hometown hero. So that generated a lot of interest in the space program for young and old alike, where I grew up at. And so probably about that time I became interested in the program and stayed interested in aviation and space all along. And finally, when I went to finish college, I decided to join the Air Force, flew for a number of years, and still had an interest in the space program and decided to give it a shot.
Okay. Does anyone else want to add to that? Okay. We have another question here.
Yes, hi, Lisa Baldwin, KPRC. You mentioned the 9 months of intensive training. To what degree, how would you describe the stress level during that time? How bad is it? How bad is it not? Would you like to just
Yeah, I would like to
clarify
address that. I'm glad you asked about this. I'd like to mention our training manager, Paula Moses, and she manages all of our hours to try and keep everything at an even keel. And it's about, it's designed to be less than 50 hours a week of time that we're actually in the simulator or doing training, whether it's in Building 9, all the things, shuttle training, aircraft dives, and things like that. And that's a really challenging job. When we started doing that training, there were still 3 missions in front of us, and they have priority on all the facilities. So it's her job to get as much work done without, as possible, facilities permitting. And she just did an outstanding job of that. So we were well positioned after STS-117 flew to not have to ramp up like they've had to do in years past. So I think it's not been stressful from a workload perspective. That 50 hours doesn't include administrative duties. We have to review changes that are made to our procedures. There's a lot of preparation that JR and the guys have done with the EVAs, the preparations for each NBL run, each neutral buoyancy lab run. There's changes to our procedures for our robotics that the arm operators have had to review. So that stuff isn't really included in the 50 hours, but I would describe it as a intensive workload, but not an excessive workload, and certainly something that we've been able to maintain for a far shorter period of time than crews like STS-114 and STS-121, where they were kind of waiting for a long time to go and kind of had to keep their workload at a high level. Comparing it to life in the squadron, 3 of us were squadron pilots before we came to NASA, and I would describe it as similar to a pilot workload in a military flying squadron. It's busy, but you're doing what you love to do. You're preparing to do something that's really important, and it's worth the effort. Pat, do you have anything you want to add on top of that?
No, I agree with that. I thought that the workload has been, it's always heavy, but people expect that. But it's been distributed nicely amongst each of the crew members also. And so it's just been a great training flow.
Hi, I'm Colleen O'Brien, and I'm representing the Reporter News from Friendswood. Are any of you living in Friendswood? That's my first question. And the second one is there's been a lot of interest in energy alternatives, so looking at your solar panel discussion this morning, and also hydrogen valves, someone said was part of an oxygen generation system, and I wondered if you could explain that a little more.
I live in Friendswood. Second part of the question, though, I don't know if that's for me or not.
Go for it.
Well, for alternative fuels, solar is a wonderful prospect, and also the fuel cells on the shuttle are another form of alternative fuels. Are they in a state where you could use them like in a home yet? These are not that type, but there are products out there that you can use for your home environment. NASA does a good job, though, I do believe, in helping promote the use of those and doing research to make them better for that use.
Thank you.
Hi, Kevin Quinn with KTRK here in Houston. I'm curious if you guys feel that the media coverage recently of the Lisa Nowak situation has been fair in your estimation, and if not, why not?
I don't think that's something you're going to be able to answer now. I think you're going to have to wait till all the facts are determined, and then, you know, we could probably look back on it 6 months from now and say whether it was fair or not. I just don't think you could say right now.
And right here.
In light of the media scrutiny in the last couple of weeks, could you describe the type of psychological testing that you have to go through before you get picked to be an astronaut and also to get picked for a mission, and describe the type of support for any sort of stress level that you might get as well?
Go ahead, Pat. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think that the psychological testing that we go through for part of the astronaut selection has probably been documented in the media this week. We have really been focused on our training, and that sometimes that means not even getting a chance to look at the newspaper. But I would tell you that for someone to get to the level in their career to where they are actually applying for and being accepted into the astronaut program is the first indicator of somebody's potential, and also probably where they stand psychologically. There's a lot of parts of the application process that involves talking to old bosses or employers, and also people that you have worked with. And so I think that as a general rule, you could take that level. And then there are some tests that we do, both written and verbal. I think that meets a requirement that most anybody going into a government job would have to take and pass. So I think it's very adequate what they do when we come in here. And like I said, I think the biggest indicator is where the applicants are in their career, whether it be a military career or civilian career for our PhDs.
Right.
Yeah, Jim Ober with NBC again, and for Rick and the rest of the crew. You brought up the issue that suddenly you're number one on the runway in terms of crew. For several years, the crews were all marching in place in priority, and you guys are third or fourth or fifth down. Suddenly you're number one. What does it bring you aside more work? Does it give you special parking spots, special badges? You're now number one on the runway. When you walk around the site, when you walk around Building 4, what perks does that give you?
The biggest improvement is for our training manager, Paula Moses, is that she has less constraints on what she has to work with scheduling to fill out our training plan. And that's the biggest change for us. We park in the same places, we wear the same badges, we eat the same foods, and we still work with all these same friendly people.
No one's sending you any special boxes of chocolates and stuff?
Not yet. I'll mention our training team, since a few of them are sitting out here with you today. You might think that, well, since you're getting close, they lighten up on you a little bit and not bear down so hard with the training, and I think it just inspires them to do even more. And we thank them for all our great training we've had here today. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we actually have to go to other NASA centers for questions, so we'll start at NASA headquarters.
Thank you. This is Tarek Malik from Space.com and Space News. I have one for either Colonel Sturkow or Colonel Forrester. You flew together on 105, I think, with Mikhail Churin, who's on station now. I'm curious how that, does that help you in terms of guiding the first-time flyers? And then I also have a follow-up.
Go ahead, Pat.
Well, you're right. CJ and I did fly together on 105, and I'll tell you that for me personally, it was just a pleasure to be reassigned to fly with him again. And I think besides just the personal enjoyment of that, what it allowed me to do was know where he was coming from, really from day one when we started our training. And although he was in a different role, he was in pilot at that point, and now as my commander, I knew the way he thought, and I knew what his values were and the things that were important, and they were all about the mission. And so that really helped me starting off to know exactly what was going to be expected in this training flow. And then as we did get our new first-time flyers on board, I knew the kind of information that he would want them to know that he felt was important, because I was a first-time flyer, and he was really the one on 105 that took me under his wing and guided me. So it made it nice for me.
And just to add about Mikhail Churin, we're looking forward to seeing him again when we get on orbit after the docking and the hatch opening. That'll be really great to see him. Thanks.
Thank you. And then my last question is really for anyone who cares to answer. We're watching the shuttle roll out today. I'm just kind of curious what you're feeling now, seeing that your vehicle is headed towards the launch pad. You're a month away from flight.
Danny.
I think the realization's kind of really starting to sink in as each day marches closer to our launch date. You kind of, I guess, come to grips with the fact that this is very soon going to become a reality, things we've trained for years now. To see the bird actually make its way to the pad, is just an actually awesome sight. And I was fortunate enough to actually watch 114 Discovery roll out to the pad a couple years back, and it's an absolutely awesome experience to see the bird up close. And when you know that bird's getting ready to in the next month or so, take you up into space and to visit space station and bring you back safely home. It's very exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, and speaking of the rollout, we'll go take questions from the Kennedy Space Center next.
Robertson of Florida today for JR and/or Danny. I'm wondering if you can talk about your roles in the development of heat shield repair techniques, and I'm curious about whether or how much confidence you have in the ability to make repairs, if you had to make repairs, and making repairs that would actually be good enough to survive reentry.
Well, I'll say a couple words, and then I'll pass it to Danny on his part. When we first got that task and we were assigned to those jobs, I know for me personally, I thought this was almost an insurmountable technical problem. But of course, as mentioned earlier, we've got a lot of incredibly intelligent folks here working with us, and we've got now what look to be some pretty good solutions that are well in their way to getting certified as a repair technique that will survive the reentry environment. And as you know, the reentry environment is a pretty dynamic place to be. And one of the things that was a surprise to me was really how narrow the margins were on everything we do. So that made it really difficult for the guys working the materials to come up with the solutions. But just as was the best of NASA back in the 60s and 70s is the same today. We have a lot of people looking at different options when we first got started on the problem, and then took the most suitable options and then carried them forward. And Danny and I have both been lucky enough to be involved in the testing and development of both the materials as well as the techniques, the applications techniques, and how we would actually affect these repairs. And so For either one of us, I would feel pretty confident, particularly more so I'd feel more confident in Danny than myself actually making the repair, that we would be able to bring it home safely. Danny?
Yeah, and I would second that. You know, I had the luck and the good fortune to work alongside many of the engineers back when, right after Columbia happened and we first started looking at repair options for both for tile and RCC repair. I happen to work specifically with the folks working RCC repair, and you know, I'm here to tell you that I've got every bit of confidence in the work that they've done and the materials that they've produced and the hardware that they've produced to within the repair criteria that's been developed by NASA and the potential use for these materials. I've seen the test data. I've actually seen the tests actually being conducted, and you know, I know these engineers and they've done an absolutely awesome job, and I've got every bit of confidence in the work that they've done.
This is Kevin Oliver from WFTV in Orlando. I was just wondering if you guys find it at all discouraging, distressing, or upsetting that this is your moment in the spotlight and your mission just happens to come up following your colleague's arrest.
Not at all. We've just been focused on our training and getting ready to go, and you know, I think that's about all we need to say about that.
And that's all the questions from the Kennedy Space Center. Are there any follow-ups here at Johnson? Bill?
Yeah, just looking at the EVAs, aside from the P6 retract, looking at the attachment of S3 and 4 and all you have to do to get the Sarge all fired up. I mean, I'm assuming that because this has been done before, you guys benefit at least a little bit in terms of lessons learned, in terms of techniques and procedures. But could you just talk about that a little, the challenge of some of the other tasks in the EVAs besides P6 retract?
As you mentioned, it's all been done before, and that's actually the hardest thing for us to do, because as it's been presented to us, you just have to do it, just do it better. You know, so for us, that's actually one of the things we practice a lot on, is getting in there and just doing everything better in every one of our NBL runs. And of course, we got a great team. These three guys to my left here are all great at doing the spacewalks, and so for what we're assigned to do, it's gonna look really easy, though it never is. And these guys are going to do a superb job. Some of the things that popped up on 12A that we're looking for are, you know, as you might have remembered, they had some of the bolts that had come loose as they were removing some of the covers. And so that was one of the things that Joe Tanner and his team came to us, and we worked just like we did with Beamer and company on their flight. What did they find out about it? How did they react to it? And then we went back to some of the engineers here to find out what the limitations were. And Pat was the guy on our team that was most instrumental in working up some of the details. And Pat, do you want to talk about the bolts a little bit?
Yeah, like JR said, we only have to go back one more mission to 12A to see some of the other challenges that we're going to have. And that's kind of, also you had mentioned that earlier, I believe. But we've got these bolts, and we now have figured out a way that we think to keep them from having the problem they had before with this retention spring coming off the back. And the technique seems to be working fairly well. The other issue that they had was the launch restraint, where they had the bolt that would not back out, and they basically, Dan Burbank and Steve McLean together, using most of their strength, it took a while to back that bolt out. And what we've done now is develop a tool. We took a tool that existed in the inventory, a torque multiplier for the Perlas in the shuttle bay, and have modified it. And it is going to be a great tool if we run into that problem with the launch restraints. So kind of the theme that's running through here is that we get to learn from the challenges that other crews have faced, and the team on the ground has responded to all those and provided us the right training and the right tools so that we can go up, hopefully not encounter those same problems again.
The last thing on the bill, a lot of the problems that we're seeing even before 12A and the 4A, when those guys were working the P6 deploy, a lot of that information has come back to us, and of course we've practiced with that. And there's been some redesign work that was done by the folks at the Cape and also the engineers here and out in California to redesign the way the 4-bar linkage, basically the substructure to the whole array, was put together so that we will not have the problems that they had deploying it, which was quite difficult for Joe and Carlos back on 4A. So we've looked at all of that, and we've gone through it in great detail. And also looking, again, as you mentioned, looking very, very closely at what were the problems they ran into on the 2B deploy so that we can get some idea what might happen to us on the retraction.
Did you have a thought?
Well, yeah, I guess I did. Just a really quick one, though. I mean, when you look at the other EVA, how do you rank them in terms of difficulty from your all's perspective, or is it all pretty much the same kind of stuff?
Probably that's, in general, most of the tasking would be about the same level of difficulty overall. Now, as Pat mentioned, we have some that we anticipate might give us some problems, and the one that was the most potentially troublesome one was what Pat mentioned with the launch restraint bolts that Dan and Steve had to deal with on 12A. They were at their max capability of being able to turn that bolt even with both guys, and neither one of them are small guys working on that bolt. So to be able to come up with that torque multiplier that was already in the inventory, modify it, get it turned around as quickly as they were able to do, the folks here at JSC did a phenomenal job getting that ready for us, which will take most of the uncertainty out of that task. That is, if we had to pick one that would be the most potentially troublesome, that is probably the one that we would look at as being the most likely occurrence.
Mark Carreau, Houston Chronicle, for Jim Reilly. I'm wondering if you can kind of go back to the 116 mission and tell us how closely you were watching that retraction, kind of what you were thinking when you saw the difficulties they had, and kind of how you responded and your colleagues to try to see if you could have a little easier time of it.
Well, we were watching it pretty closely. I was over in mission control along with some of the other guys watching it from the back rooms, and it was really, I've known Beamer now for 13 years, and we interviewed together and came in together with CJ in the 95 class, and so we've known Beamer for quite some time and know him pretty well. And it was interesting to watch because we're in the back room going, just do this, you know, and he would do it. And so it was working out pretty well. So when we looked at it and watched what he was doing, you know, it was looking at it and seeing, okay, the mechanics of it seemed almost obvious. So when he was reporting for example, the coiled up guide wire, when they first brought it down and brought it to full retraction, you know, it being underneath the solar array panels, we were all in the back room just going, just grab it with the needle nose pliers and pull it out of there, which is exactly what he did. So when he came back, in our first discussions, that's what we talked about was, you know, how well did that work and what were the difficulties, and pretty much what he had experienced and what we were seeing in the back rooms was exactly what he was able to report.
Elizabeth Lee with KHCW News. This is a question for many of the veteran astronauts. In many of your missions, you have a more co-ed crew. Being an all-male crew, can you describe whether there's a different feel and dynamics as you train on the 117 mission?
Well, I'd just point out, you know, it's not really an all-male crew. We're going to have FE2 Sunita Williams up there. She's trained with Brew. And Brew, why don't you tell a little bit about the crew coordination you'll be doing with Sunny as you guys install the S3, S4 truss, maybe just from the handoff onward.
Sure. I'll be working, as CJ said, with Sonny Williams on the install of the S3, S4. Sonny and I trained together for several months, but we stopped training together in about, I guess it was an early November time frame as she prepared for her launch on the last mission. But what Sonny will be doing, and we'll also be rehearsing it on her own through some training sessions that she'll have with our trainers on the station here shortly, is Sonny will be preparing this space station robotic arm to receive the truss segment as Pat unberths it from our payload bay and hands it off. I will assist Sonny as she grapples the S3, S4 truss, but Sonny will be the lead robotics arm officer at that time. We'll then grab the S3, S4 truss, and then we'll go back and work. I'll work with Pat again on the space shuttle robotic arm, and relocating that to be in a nice viewing position for the install, which will take place the next day. Sonny and I let me go back, we'll actually start doing this work as far as handing off the S3, S4 truss very shortly after the space shuttle docks with the space station. The very next morning, we'll come. Sonny and I will work together and move the S3, S4 truss from that handoff position where we'll have been parked overnight into an install position, and we'll get it fully installed to get the ready to latch indicators, and at that point it'll be in good shape for J.R. Reilly Danny will just go out the door and perform their first spacewalk.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question here.
Thanks. Tracy Watson, USA Today. For the commander, looking at the overall picture of this mission, both the robotics work and the EVAs, you know, what's your kind of white knuckle moment, or the thing that you think will be most challenging about getting done? And for both the commander and the pilot, can you tell us how you got your nicknames, because it's not obvious? Thanks.
Let's see. The white knuckle moments, I think that that's been our job on the ground, to use things that might make you think you have white knuckles about it, to work it and talk it over with our flight control team, led by our lead flight director, Kelly Beck. And we've had meetings as a crew with her. JR and I have met extensively with her about things during the spacewalk. So I think anything that was a white knuckle item that needed to be addressed got addressed. And there's always something that happens unexpected on a spaceflight mission. Hopefully it will be for example, a good thing that might happen, like 2B will attract like it's supposed to and won't require a lot of assistance. But if unexpected things happen that that will require extra attention, we'll rely on our flight control team and Kelly and her folks. She's got the right group of people to address the issue and make sure everything gets resolved. My call sign CJ came from when I was in a Marine squadron, back when I was a lieutenant. It stands for Caustic Junior. It's not because I have a caustic personality. People thought I looked like the squadron commander, and his call sign was Caustic, and that was an appropriate call sign for him. Go ahead, Brew.
A lot of people hear me being referred to as Brew. It's not the BREW version of Brew. It's actually BRU. It stands for Bomb Rack Unit. My initial jet I flew in the Air Force was the F-111, and our suspension equipment holding our ordnance was called a Bomb Rack Unit, and I had a bad experience inadvertently getting rid of one of those on an exercise when I was a very young lieutenant, and the nickname has managed to stick for over 20 years now. I thought when I came to NASA 8 years ago that would be all over with, but one of the first days I walked through the door here, someone addressed me as Brew, and I stuck, so here we are.
Okay, that will wrap up our press conference here. Thank you so much for tuning in and coming. For other programming here on NASA Television, coming up next from the Kennedy Space Center, there will be a Themis pre-launch news conference. And for more information about this mission and others at NASA, you can look online at www.nasa.gov. Thank you.